a lot, and welcome as well to my colleagues of the NextGen Net. It's Millie who's helping us with the techniques, and Nessim, Luc Breton, our partner, Dan Bernardini. He will be writing the article about our session, and I'm welcoming as well. I have not seen them yet, but our partners and sponsors of Fabric and Hola Spirit that are enabling these sessions to be free of charge for everybody that can join. The topic of today, learn or die, how the NextGen Enterprise uses adaptive learning to thrive. And with us today, I welcome Cristina Riesen. She is the founder and CEO of Educreators Foundation, which is an impact organization supporting deep change in education. She is an EMScom graduate, certified strategic foresight practitioner, and design thinking professional. Christina, you're a seasoned entrepreneur, experienced in different fields in technology, innovation, education, design, and media. And in recent years, you were the general manager of Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Evernote. And you managed the launch of the Swiss Edtech Collider at EPFL Lausanne, and you were working with the strategic development team at ETH Zurich. So you were as well named a digital shaper by our leading Swiss economic magazine Bilanz in 2019 and 20. Warm welcome to you, Christina. So what I wonder is, like, what was thriving you the last years? What is the purpose that you feel so strongly?
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and a warm hello and welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you this evening. I'm a big fan of NextGen Enterprise, and I'm very excited about everything that has to do with technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So as you can imagine, I was looking very much forward to the chat this evening. To go back to your question, Suzanne, well, actually, I am really an enthusiast by nature, and I am an explorer. I've always tried to understand what is happening in the world of education, of technology, of innovation. In the past years, I have been actively involved in all the projects you've mentioned. And I believe that when we are looking at the evolutionary purpose of organizations, or at our personal development as humans, education is the key, right? So in the end, the question is, how do we take advantage of all amazing technological development, of all amazing human potential, combine them, and then create a better world?
So it's about education that you're so passionate in, and to bring that and to you said in the preparation that there is a revolution that is going to happen.
Yes, exactly. And I was a bit provocative in the title of the chat today, but it was on purpose. Because in the end, if we do not adapt, if we do not learn, especially in the world today changing so fast with so many challenges, we simply cannot make it. We will not survive. And I would like to actually share some of my thoughts. I've prepared a few slides, so perhaps it will be possible to do so.
Yeah, let me quickly say a few words about how we are going to proceed today.
Yes.
So this session is mentioned to be, or is meant to be, a interactive session, because adaptive learning is something that needs to be co-created. Christina, I think you'll agree on that, and as well the exchange on that. So we will be looking at your presentation, and then we will do some stops where we ask a question, and you will get a time box to write your answer into the chat. And I would then invite the audience to unmute your mic and to listen to some comments before we continue with the presentation. So, and if there is a question to a topic that Christina is talking about, feel free to just write a comment in the chat. Otherwise, as you see, you put the mics on mute, and as soon as you talk, feel free to unmute yourself, since we are not that many tonight, so there is no problem with that. So yes, the floor is yours. So you will be starting to talk about adaptive learning, and yeah, we want to figure out learn or die. So adaptive learning is seems to be an important thing for the next gen organization.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, for your kind introduction and for setting the stage. Yes, and basically, I argue that today, adaptive learning is at the stage of profound and exponential development. Perhaps just for the sake of definition, at the highest level, adaptive learning technologies make it basically possible to accurately assess a learner's knowledge level and her skills. And at the same time, they help create a bespoke learning journey that is personalized to her or his needs. Now, when we are looking at the growth in terms of the market potential, it's enough when we see that basically compared to 2018, indeed, the growth is forecasted to be exponential. And this is basically on one hand due to technological progress, but then of course, this is also due to the needs of our society. COVID, as you can imagine, was an accelerator. So no wonder that with everybody moving most of the activities in organizations, also in schools, having been forced for some time at least to move things online, everything that had to do with online learning and also adaptive learning became a big topic. Now, when we look back, the notion of adaptive learning is actually nothing new. So when we go back to the 50s, for example, there were already researchers, scientists, Mr. Skinner, for example, he was already talking about the teaching machine for incremental skills building. And also when we look at technology, actually, we could argue, there was an early AI movement, AI, artificial intelligence. What we see today was not born 2 years ago, but there has been a significant development. But basically what has happened is that this progress in the past, let's say 40, 50 years was rather slow. And despite significant technical progress, the aspiration to use artificial intelligence to reproduce high quality one-on-one learning was still just a remote dream. Now enter technology development today. And I think here we are at the crossroad. And basically, when we look at the advances in machine learning and other areas of artificial intelligence, and at the same time, open sourcing of different frameworks, this actually start making it possible to deliver on the actual promise of high quality adaptive learning and to provide bespoke feedback to any learner in whatever part of their journey there may be. When we look at emerging technologies, I will not go too much in depth, but for those of you who may be interested are not necessarily so much into the topic or engineers, then I highly recommend keeping an eye on Gartner's reports. And also they have this hype cycle format, which is always very interesting to look at. And then when we look at what they published last year in terms of emerging technologies, we see that things like, for example, adaptive machine learning or responsible AI are up and coming, and they are going to significantly influence the way we develop learning technologies in the years to come. So perhaps for those of you who are not aware of this hype cycle, it has different stages. So you may relate to that. Take as an example, perhaps also the latest craze on the whatever social media channel that you have been adopting. And then you know that in the beginning, there's this kind of innovation trigger. Then there's this peak of inflated expectations. So it goes really high and everybody believes that this is going to change the world. This is it. With that, everything is solved. And then after that is the throw of disillusionment, right? So then, of course, we realize that, oh, there are challenges, be it technical, be it we don't have, the regulatory framework in place, or there are many other constraints. And then basically it goes through the slope of enlightenment, and then it reaches this plateau of productivity. So when we look at, for example, just to take one of them, explainable artificial intelligence, you look at it, you see that it has a dark blue dot. So this means in terms of forecast that the plateau of productivity is forecasted to be reached in 5 to 10 years. But when this is going to be the case, this is going to change many of the tools and processes we use. It's going to be a bit like, if you would have told somebody 30 years ago how a smartphone would work, and that's going to be available for almost anybody around the world, right? So when we look at explainable AI, for example, if today, let's say you're training the model and you want that model to recognize a picture of a cat, to give a very basic example, you will train the model by just feeding it with thousands or millions of images of cats of all colors and forms. And then whenever then you present it with a picture of yet another cat, it will say it's a cat, but it will not be able to tell you why, right? So explainable AI is going to make it possible to actually say, whenever you go back to the cat example, that if the system recognizes the image of a cat, it will also say that because it has this type of fur and the ears, and this is why I came to this conclusion. So you can imagine that this is going to be incredibly impactful for our organizations and just the way we can process information and we can make decisions and we can learn.
So when you say, Cristina, that today adaptive learning, that's not a reality yet, what would you say? Like, where do we stand today? And if you said like that's like for a preview for talking about the smartphone, so that's a reality that is going to be there in 10 years. Like how do you see this evolving? Or
yeah, so for the time being, adaptive learning, it is here. Advanced adaptive learning, so again, we are looking at technology. It is here, it is developing, but it is used only for some parts of the organization. And we will have a closer look at this. I prepared some examples. We can have a look at this. But as you can imagine, going forward, actually more and more, every aspect of us as individuals in our personal learning journey, but also us as organizations in our every single component, from strategy making to implementation of projects to team building, they will be all somehow touched by this new technology. So this is to say that adaptive learning and advanced adaptive learning is gonna just spike in the next 5 to 10 years. We are gonna see incredible progress in this direction.
and you were saying that you make a link to the NextGen Enterprises with the evolutionary purpose. So, like, what is your idea about like what adaptive learning? Where do you see the link of adaptive learning and the evolutionary purpose, which is one of the key differences of a NextGen organization to others normals?
Yes, thank you very much for asking this question, because in the end, it's not so much about technology as it is about the context and also the purpose and what it is that we aspire to do. And I was personally very inspired by Frederic Laloux's Reinventing Organizations, the book that appeared a few years ago. And one could argue that when we look at NextGen enterprises, they aspire to operate from a Teal and possibly below and beyond, I mean, and beyond level. So what does this mean in practice, right? So it means that they are organizations who care not only about profit, of course, but also about people and trust and freedom and empowerment. And they see themselves as continuously learning. And above all, they operate in this sense and respond environment. And I think this is a key point, right? Because it's enough to see what has happened last year. And we know that 5-year plannings, may be less useful going forward. So how do you empower organizations who perhaps also aspire to move in this direction, but they just don't know how, or they don't know how or which tools to use or how to look at it? And I would say looking at the bigger goal and what it is that you care about is incredibly important.
So we were preparing a question or questions to involve the audience, and we would like to start with this question, and we proceed as follows. You have like a 2-minute time box to reflect on this question individually. And like to reflect, maybe we can go back later. We just put the questions into the chat. So if you open the chat box on the bottom of your screen, you see the questions that we just have here on the slide, and we can maybe go back to the previous slide with the overview of Lalu. So from which level does your organization operate from? So like, where are we today? And like, if you consider that your organization is a Teal organization, how does your organization, or how does the Teal organization enable continuous learning? You have a time box from now 2 minutes, and please write your answers into the chat. The time box starts now.
Perhaps, Cristina, you can share your tab again.
You can share your screen again with the Lalu.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks.
And for you, please write your answers into the chat of our Zoom session. We have another 20 seconds. So let's have a look. If I can ask you to write your comments into the chat box, and Cristina, you're reading with me. Maybe so we hear, we see like which level do you think your organization is in? We see a lot of orange to green. Amber to orange. Orange, but asking question about herself, moving from green to teal.
Yeah,
From
so I would be very
Tanya.
interested from Tanya. Tanya, could you perhaps tell us more? Sounds very intriguing. So you're moving from green to teal opal, which is really interesting. Could you perhaps share a few thoughts on how you're doing that?
Actually, so maybe I can give you some background on the organization where I work, which is in the healthcare system. I work at Roche in the innovation arena. And we are mainly known as treatment and drug developers. And we are in the middle of the movement going from the molecule to the service arena. And this brings us to review the whole organization, culture, mindset, ways of working. At first, when I wanted to answer, I tend to say we are at the teal opal because I'm optimistic about that. But clearly, we have some obstacles yet to cross. But we are looking forward to empower further the employees in terms of accountability, self-learning and continuous learning, and provide the right tools to do so. Because we consider that it's at the core of the culture of the enterprise before spreading into the developments of services or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it answers your first question, but
yeah, this is very interesting. And one question would be, you know, is it possible to look at the organization as a whole and say, okay, we are at this level? Isn't it that perhaps some parts of the organization will somehow be at different levels? What do you think?
Out of my experience, we are moving bit by bit in the sense that it's Roche is a big organization with a corporate level and the affiliates. I sit within an affiliate, but clearly this transformation is occurring at both levels. But in terms of adopting this learning curve and change, I tend to say that you have the early adopters and then you can move to the majority. Yes. What is great now, the period where we stand, is that the whole company has taken in charge and supports this transformation. But the past years was clearly focused on the early adopters before enlarging to the whole company.
This is super interesting. So I'd be more than happy to have a chat after the event and keep in touch and learn more, but definitely very inspiring. Thanks a lot.
And maybe about our second question, how do Teal organizations enable continuous learning? So for those who feel like you're approaching Teal organizations, like if we look at your answers, go through, I see like retrospective as an instrument, a right to fail mindset, delegation, learning by trying. Teal allows continuous learning by letting people bring their whole selves to work, from Brian. Is there somebody who would like to share what your opinion is about this question? So what do you think is really specific in a Teal Opal organization to enable continuous learning? Brian, you're taking.
May I jump again?
Oh, you can, yeah, go on.
My first intuition is to say that the conditions that foster such developments and change is trust and a safe environment to try and fail, and and I think that will nurture the pace of learning. So trust and the safe environment to enable failing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Brian, you were unmuting your mic as well.
Tanya almost said exactly what I was going to say. Is an organization has to have psychological safety so that people can take some reasonable risks and fail without having repercussions that would basically make them shut down or stop trying.
Yeah. So this is really like a precondition, what you're saying. Somebody else, what is there somebody else who'd like to share? Like, yeah, Alexis.
Yeah, I totally agree with what has just been said. I'm thinking that it's always a mix of both soft elements and hard elements. Soft really looking from indeed having this psychological safe space where you can try and and make errors, and it's errors are things that make you improve actually. So there is definitely a big part to be played in the leadership behavior. But then I think there is also definitely from a, I would say, more structural way, how do you foster such type of learning by having a dedicated budget by person to also follow learnings? What do you organize yourself as an organization? And also, I think next to the psychological space, you also need to have the headspace. So if you're constantly under the water working, it's having dedicated time, whether once a month, to really focus on learning new things. I think that's also something that is important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Alexis.
Excellent. So I would like to take it from here, because we were talking a lot about learning, and in the end, the big question is, what should learning be today? When we look at 21st century education and learning, be it at the school level or in organizations or personal level, what is it that we are looking at? And in some of the projects that I'm involved with, we came across this framework from the Center for Curriculum Redesign, which I thought is a good sum up of the different dimensions that are important. Because on one hand, it is about knowledge. And also when we were in school, it was a lot about knowledge. So be it, very traditional disciplines, we had to learn mathematics and so on. And today there are new topics coming up, entrepreneurship or others. On the personal level, as the world, I think, is changing through technology, we have to understand more and more new topics. And also, even though we don't become experts, have an understanding, for example, how algorithm works, because, if not, Brexit happens or other things. So it's super important that the knowledge is here and that we get to understand and to know what is around us. But this is just one part. And in traditional education in the past, this has been overly emphasized. But then equally important are skills. So once we know something, how do we actually use what we know? And this is the place for creativity, for critical thinking, for communication and collaboration. And hopefully we will see a lot of progress in formal education, which will allow to put a lot of emphasis also on this pillar, because this is what we need in order to be, I would say, first of all, fulfill our potential and also be able creatively and collaboratively to figure out solutions for our big challenges. It's impossible to do without that. And then there's a third pillar, the character. And this has to do with how we behave and how we engage in the world. And it has to do with mindfulness and with curiosity and courage, resilience, ethics, and leadership. Incredibly important, because it takes a lot of courage to change the world. It takes a lot of ethical, I would say, attitude when you start developing certain products, or when you are part of organizations that are touching the lives of millions of people out there and also influencing the ecosystems that we are part of. And this should not be underestimated. And these three pillars should be ideally surrounded by this meta-learning dimension. And this is about how do we step back and how do we reflect and how do we adapt to what is happening around us. It has to do with metacognition and also with a growth mindset. Now, I am personally a big fan of the growth mindset. Carol Dweck, a Stanford professor, coined this term and did a lot of research, because I don't know how was your education journey as a child, but in my case, I grew up in a fixed mindset environment. So basically, I was taught to believe that, you know, I should avoid challenges. I should give up if there's an obstacle. I should basically try not to be criticized if possible, and really please everybody, my teachers, my parents, you know, try to fit in, and also consider very well that if I was born in a certain environment, I can only aspire to be that much. And as a result, this kind of thinking and of, I would say, framework around me, of course, leads to this idea that, you know, there's limits to what you can do. It's, you know, there's no way that, like, if you study this, you can only be that. And by the magic of life, I was forced into actually getting out of the fixed mindset. I was really forced into, okay, what I was doing in the past didn't work anymore. I was in a new country, completely new situation. And that triggered the growth mindset and the entrepreneur in me. And I was really fascinated when I came across Carol Dweck's research and this concept of growth mindset, and how important it is that we, as parents, as team members, as friends, as citizens, we encourage everybody around us to look through this lens, that we can continuously develop, we can embrace challenges, we can persist in the face of setbacks, and then we can learn from criticism, and as a result, we can reach higher levels of achievement, of personal, I would say, you know, just in terms of the sky is the limit, you know, you can really aspire to learn and to become whoever you want to be.
So Christina, there is a link between what we've just said, like that the companies and organizations need to set this environment for failure, that there is trust. Have you experienced that in organizations? Like, on what was the magic that this was changing? Like we just say that that's something that needs to be put into place. What have you observed? Like, what was the magic to create this environment of trust and try and error and sense and response?
Yes, so I remember when I joined Evernote, it was early on when they were still quite small, and it really felt like you're embarking on a spaceship and you're being projected into the far, far future, because it was way beyond what I used to know as a organization, corporation. And this is where I, for the first time, truly experienced an environment that encouraged and believed in you. And basically they preached the growth mindset, and they wanted you to feel like you are giving your, you know, like really going to the direction that you feel you're fulfilled. And also together with the others, you're contributing to creating something really great. So I would say that there I experienced firsthand this idea of embracing failures, and then also seeing it as part of a learning journey. And the idea was not so much how much do you fail or how often, but the most important thing was, what do we learn from it? Mm-hmm. And how do we embed these learnings in our journey going forward really fast without the judgment, you know, attached, or trying to finger point or you know, trying to find somebody who did something wrong. And I think this is where adaptive learning and technology comes in, because in the end, it is a question of providing the right feedback at the right time. Mm-hmm. And being able to have that in, I would say, a world where, again, it's on one hand, your complexity as an individual, but then there's also your relationship with your team, then the understanding of the organizational goal. So it's very, very complex. So having tools that allow you to get feedback when you need it, the right one that allows you to grow, and you embracing this growth mindset and playing in an environment that embraces failure are essential.
Okay, wonderful. So that's why we came up with these questions that we would like to ask you now in the audience. And you get another, I would say, 1 minute time box because it's quite fast to answer. Again, in the chat, please. Did you grow up with a fixed or a growth mindset? And what got you out of the fixed mindset if you grew up in the fixed mindset? And what is fueling your growth mindset? So I give you a minute for reflection while you can write into the chat. And for those who will be willing to share, you can already prepare you to unmute your mic and share your experience. The minute has started. Thanks to Sam, already written. We are really curious to read. So the time box is over, and I suggest, like Sam or Claire, maybe if you want to share quickly what you wrote, if you want to comment on that, would be wonderful.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. This is Sam.
Hi.
So for me, I was fortunate enough to have grown up, I think, in a growth mindset. I don't think you can fully do it that way, but I had a lot of experiences and mentors that helped encourage seeing failure or seeing setbacks as a way to move forward and how to learn from that. And then later on, having organizations that actually built structures to encourage that. And so I think that had a key piece for me. And also my organization teaches self-management. So we help patients to understand how to better feel less victimized by the world around them and how to have agency and what control they do have. And so teaching that, it also is something that's reflected as a value of the organization.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. Who else would like to share? What was your journey about the fixed and growth mindset?
I can say a few words.
Yes, please, Claire.
Yes, very traditional education. And so fixed mindset with parents, no education. And anyway, I changed career, I changed jobs. I had many different trainings, degrees. And I love to learn, to understand and meet different types of people. So I'm very curious. And I think that's what I can say. And I love meeting people and enjoying life. So that's how I keep myself growing, or fuel my passion to understand.
Thank you very much, Claire. So thanks a lot for all the messages that are continuing coming in. Cristina, is there something that triggered your curiosity?
Yes, I mean, thank you very much, everybody, for sharing. And Pierre, Alexander, you said that the growth mindset is fueled first by example, and then by discovering the good results of the growth mindset. And I find this really interesting. Perhaps you can share more about that, because this goes in that direction of how important it is in a next-gen environment to set the example. Could you say more about your experience?
Yes. I'm reading a book now saying that most of our thought, our ways of thinking, comes by the evolution of mankind, and that in the past some awareness of danger, of awareness of new thing was a good thing because it allows you to survive, and that naturally we have often we have the direction of not trusting the other, not going to new people, and so I don't think growth is very natural, but it's why I'm there today at this exchange, is because example and teaching show that there is new way of thinking. And what is nice is I completely agree with the lady who spoke before. After you see that life is easier when you have a growth mindset. You're able to support change which are not welcome.
Yes, this is very well said. Basically, you flow with life.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Suzanne, if you allow me, I will continue because just being mindful, we only have 1 hour. I wish we would have more. Of course, there's many things to cover, but looking again at this bigger context of the next Gen Enterprise, perhaps you're familiar with the Four Quadrants from Ken Wilber. Basically, this has to do on how do we look at the world. And the Four Quadrants mean basically that we should at all point in time consider the individual, so us, but the interior and also the exterior, and also the collective, the we, which also has an interior and an exterior. And this is where I see for the next 5 to 10 years, the biggest potential for adaptive learning in supporting the goal of NextGens to be learning organizations. Because I could argue that it is not about only training individuals and supporting them in their own further development or focusing only on teams and their development, but also taking into consideration how does everything we do also affect the systems around us, for example. And then this Four Quadrants view that I'm showing here actually is very concrete. It's based on the so-called integral life practice. So this is, I would say, a level that is definitely in the range of Teal and Bilanz. So if you're operating from that level, it means that when you look at yourself, the interior eye, you are comfortable with complexity, you embrace flexible and adaptive thinking, and you have a strong desire to learn and grow. This is in you. And then looking at your behavior, so this is the exterior, there you also see that basically it's all about adaptation to life conditions, acting spontaneously and appropriately, for example, and also quickly learning the necessary skills that are needed, not only for yourself, but actually for the greater good. And then when we look at the we, the collective, we as teams, we as organizations, as society, then if we operate from that level, it is really about high trust and the low fear culture. So going back to exactly what you were saying before, failure and encouraging that, it's about strategic collaboration, coaching and mentoring, and it's really about the learning organization. And when we look at the collective, it has to do with adaptive systems and then using the appropriate technology to support our goals. And then, of course, in that framework, you're looking at success not only defined by profit, but it's actually the triple bottom line. So it's profit, people, and the planet. So I would say that in order to flow with complexity, because it is not about managing, as Pierre Alexander was also rightly saying before, in the end, what you want is to flow with that, flow with complexity, embrace an evolutionary purpose, and this ongoing adaptation, broadening the view of the world in order to have a long-term impact. Now, I know that we have prepared some other questions here, but just being mindful of the time, I would perhaps encourage you to, after the event tonight, spend some time to think about these quadrants and also ask yourself, is your organization a quadrant absolutist? Is it focusing only on one part, and how could it actually embrace more of that and use adaptive learning going forward to broaden up the horizon? Now, going back to this question we had in the beginning, how do actually organizations today use adaptive learning technologies? Well, it is mainly focusing on very specific areas. I didn't want to promote any providers or solutions. So of course, when we look at formal education, one example that we can look at is Higher University. They're doing a great job, is the Arizona State University. There are many others, also here in Switzerland, for sure. But just to give a very concrete examples of how they basically took adaptive learning and plugged it in these very specific components, right? So when it is about acquiring information or assessment, you have these adaptive systems doing the part. And then of course, there's the active class, human touch when it has to do with application and assimilation. But really interesting is that it's already showing in terms of performance of students what happens before adaptive and up after adaptive. And I think this signals very strongly that there's huge potential in terms of empowering our organizations with adaptive learning. And basically today, most of our organizations are using adaptive learning for training and development. There are really great advances on that front because training is very costly. We all know that. And of course, ideally, it needs to translate in increased performance and business impact. And with this type of tools and technologies and systems, you can actually improve not a bit, but 10 times or even more the learner performance and have also very clear, measurable, quantifiable business data. And you can imagine, just taking an example, think about, just moving in a small organization or rather small with 100 employees, just moving from a 3-hour training that you're doing to something that is half the time, that runs over a year in terms of time gained and also budget makes already a significant difference. And I would say here, when we look at the Arizona State University, you saw also before, there was an increase in the student success rate, but what is also equally important, and this is huge, it showed 90% reduction of student dropouts. So this means that the learning journey was no longer frustrating, that people actually looked forward to doing it and being there. And this is also huge in terms of how do we look again at people and people empowerment. And there are many things to bring in for the why and how it works. But I would say, just think about these infinite learning loops that we had even maybe 5 years ago with e-learning systems, right? So first you would have an assessment. It would be the same for everybody. First you had to read a full manual, and then you were looked in this death, as a dead end of same questions without any support. Whereas today, with this advanced adaptive learning technologies and advanced artificial intelligence, basically adaptive feedback can guide learners towards accuracy very fast and take them where they are with the knowledge they master. Then these technologies, they enable also to move beyond a content-first approach. So I would say this is also a big game changer in terms of efficiency and also learning experience. And then when we are looking at the learning organization and going forward, in the past few years, there were perhaps e-learning systems that provided indeed lots of data, but it was not possible to interpret them in real time. So then you would have perhaps partners, and you would have to hire a whole team of data scientists to look and digest what is happening. Whereas this today, can be done in real time, and it is also accompanied by very clear recommendations. So this is, I would say, just the very beginning, and we are definitely moving towards integrated adaptive learning platforms in the future. And what we see today is learning content management and assessment and skills management and development, mentoring and collaboration, and learning experience. But as I was arguing in the beginning, when showing this emerging technology from Gartner, this is just about to start. So expect in the next 5 to 10 years to actually have adaptive learning embedded at all levels and in all layers of the organization. And it would be that moment when you show up to work and you would basically ask, what does my team need at this moment in order to be able to progress with this goal or task, and what do I need to support it? And you would have all the information you need, and the people who need it will have it at the same time. I know that it may sound a bit like science fiction, but this is what's up and coming down the line. And this is why I am personally super excited about the potential of adaptive learning technologies. And I would argue that this is going to be something that is core to NextGen Enterprise.
Thank you so much, Cristina, for sharing all these insights. So if I understand you correctly, it's as well like moving from the individual quadrant to the team and organization quadrant, as of like, okay, how is the team learning? How is the organization learning? That this is the main challenge, I guess.
Yes, and then even more so, interacting with external systems. So this is where I think it's going to get really interesting, because if we think of the triple bottom line and we think about profit, people, and planet, it would be really wonderful to have this for, kind of the embedded adaptive learning in all 4 quadrants, because that's going to be indeed a game changer.
So thanks a lot, Jean-Yves. You're already responding to the question with a systemic approach. What I suggest is, since we have 6 minutes left, is that answering these questions, that we go rather into a discussion about that, because this is exactly where the collective intelligence comes in. If we hear Cristina, the answer is not there yet. So, and the game changer will be to move from this individual learning and training approach, where we focus mainly on the individual, on the whole planet, and on the impact our organization has in the world. I'd like to open the stage now for questions and comments about this topic. So when you think of adaptive learning, how would you imagine the implementation in your organization? What are opportunities and threats? What would like to comment on that?
And perhaps to add just a little bit of pepper to this discussion, of course, there are threats and challenges and big open questions, and they have to do also with data privacy and learners' data. How do we manage that? What about data protection, data ownership? What about the discussion around those topics? So I'd be very curious to know, when you're thinking of adaptive learning in the future and the way in which it could touch on all 4 quadrants, what do you see as opportunities and threats? Thank you, Brian. Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening.
So maybe we can dig into that topic. I think that needs or requires some thought. Now there is Jean-Yves Renaud. Maybe you want to share your thoughts about it. You were unmuting yourself? No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, but Dan wanted to say something. He was raising his hand,
Okay, wonderful.
yeah, and so before me, so I think.
Thanks, man. No, I just had a quick thought. What color organization would you call our current Western governments to see in what environment we're hoping to become Teal? And maybe that would be an interesting dynamic to bring up.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, the Western, I think this is a huge debate, you know, so if we are to get there, depending on the country, because we cannot put them all in the same bucket, you know, we do have, everybody has their own views of the world. And also here in Switzerland, especially when faced with the pandemic, I think these levels show more and more and the way people operate. But, you know, like if you have to put one color on the whole Western world, you know, I would say it would be fair to say, to be optimistic, greenish. I'm very optimistic. As we know, this is not, and again, I know it's not the reality, but I would say we see more and more, let's put it this way, positive signals towards, for me, this is more like a self-fulfilling prophecy that I want to put there in the world, you know. So when I'm saying greenish, of course, it is not green, but it's more an aspiration. I think we have to have a second session if we are to debate on governments and levels of development.
Yeah, but you make clearly, Dan, you're making the link of like saying the government has an influence on like what's happening in sense of data security and everything. Like
yeah,
the environment for organizations.
To be in an environment that fosters trust, it's hard right now, I think, in maybe, you know, the West. I that's where I live, so that's what I see.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I pass the word to Jean-Yves. You were
Yes, so I said that the main, thank you, Suzanne. I said that the main issue that I'm facing currently is the how to get to quick wins. Because so I'm working on the transformation where one of the driver is learning of the future team, and what we are struggling to is to prove, not to show, to prove that there are some benefits. And because it's in our days, a lot of people, the managers are looking for quick wins or quick benefits because of, I think, pandemic has modified the way they see things, and they want really to move forward very quickly. So this is my main issue, and we don't exactly know how we can do that. So some advices would be very appreciated, Cristina.
Yes, so it goes back to this thought of different parts of the organization being at different levels of development as well. And I would say there, it's important to fit the communication, and there you're right, you know, so creating the quick wins, and this can be sometimes done through pilot projects done in a smart way, but it's really important to work also on creating that understanding of why it's an advantage to move towards Teal and beyond. And that requires also letting go of these quick wins in the end, right? So
yes. This is I'm getting how do you say that, schizophrenic.
Yes,
sometimes.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, I can totally understand. And this is where the NextGen Enterprise needs advocates and needs people who are great in communicating, because you have to take people where they are.
Sure.
How it is. But then you have to master this art of showing them the potential and to inspire them to embrace a broader view of the world. Not saying that theirs is wrong or anything like that. It is also a valid point, but showing them that there's much more to that. And this is where you will have to actually work on defining the new quick wins. And this is the toughest, but I would say this is where a community like the NextGen Enterprise is incredibly valuable, because this is where by sharing also best practice and knowledge, and I was super inspired to hear, before, very concrete examples on how organizations go or aspire to go in that direction. I think this is where it's much needed, so that that you're not alone in that sense, and we can learn from each other.
Thank you very much, Cristina. So we are approaching the end of our session, and I would like to thank here Cristina for your inspiration, for the announcing of the new revolution. And maybe my last question before we go into the final and announcing the next steps is like, if you had a magic stick, Cristina, to transform the world in terms of adaptive learning, how would this new world look like? What are ingredients you would see there?
Yeah, so my magic stick would be probably enabling people with the right feedback at the right time. And somebody mentioned also in the comments today that they were very much getting into the growth mindset because of mentors, and because having that support when the time was needed there. And I would say that if we could accompany individuals, organizations, and systems with the right feedback at the right time from a Teal and beyond perspective, that would be the magic that I would love to do.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for being here, Cristina. It was wonderful having you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for
thank you very much.
And I look very, very much forward to keeping in touch. I think this is an incredible community, and there's so much to share, and the world needs us to come together and to figure out how we can move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So what I would like to draw your attention to, and I was happy to see Jean-Louis Bénard that was with us tonight. I'm not sure if you're still around. Jean-Louis will be our next guest for the next week's session. You find all the information on the nextgenenterprise.com, the links to subscribe. And if Jean-Louis, if you're still around, would you like to say 1-2 sentences about what you're going to talk about?
Yes, sure. So it's very simple. We see that many employees are looking for companies that are committed to the planet, and at the same time, companies are looking for people who are engaged in the company, and the topic is how we can connect these two topics to align the expectations of both parties, companies and employees.
Wonderful. So I'm really looking forward hosting your session in 1 week, and you can see always on the nextgenenterprise.com website and as well on LinkedIn on who is actually in schedule, and you realize that there are some sessions in English and as well in French, since we have a big French community over France, Switzerland, Belgium, and the Canada. Therefore, some sessions are in French as well. So looking forward, Jean-Louis, being with you on that topic next week. And with this, we will listen to some music while we are leaving the session. If you want to give us a comment and a feedback in the chat, most welcome. We are curious to hear that. I was really happy to be with you tonight, and I hope to see you next week, all of you.